I remember when a bunch of leftists and, I don't know, liberals, feminists, whatever, got mad at Jordan Peterson because he said something to the effect of masculinity is order and femininity is chaos or something to that effect, and there's seeking a balance. And maybe I'm completely wrong about that. It's been a long time. But I do see this story and then think that there is an interesting correlation in the idea of order, chaos, masculinity, and femininity. We had the story from Insider, written by Noah Berlatsky, who says, "My wife is bisexual and non-binary, and my daughter is transgender. My queer family helped me better understand myself and my masculinity." No, I don't think that's correct. Let me fix this for you. Your wife is not bisexual and non-binary. Your partner is, because non-binary would exclude the terminology wife. Your daughter is transgender, which is, I believe, correct in the modern nomenclature, and your family is queer. But just correct you on the whole wife part. What we're really seeing here is chaos. The degradation of the family into ideas that make little to no sense and simply confuse the average person, making it impossible for them to understand what's going on. So it's no surprise to me we're seeing the things that we're seeing. We've got this story I also want to talk about. Andrew Tate's violent misogynistic teachings are seeping into classrooms. How to counter the tidal wave of misogyny spurred by anti-feminist influencers. Oh, just across the board. Question. Oh, look at that one. I like that one. Leftism before and after from Sour Patch Lids. Not even once. Sam Smith. And now I don't know what he's doing. It's degradation and it's a breakdown. And I call it chaos. But there's an interesting correlation between these ideas of femininity and chaos and masculinity and order. And it's simply put this way. Feminists tend to uphold these ideas, and that's the correlation. Call it whatever you want. But this guy, Noah Berlatsky, is walking right into it. So let's talk about the crisis of the American family, the crisis of the American male, and where we're going. I have to wonder about this story. I wonder about it because it feels like with this insider article from this quote unquote journalist, we are seeing breakdown. A system cannot survive if implementing nonsensical prompts or protocols. And if it's nonsensical, what I mean is if you can't make sense of it, if you don't know what words mean and how to describe ideas, then ultimately ideas cannot be conveyed and you get, bridges collapsing and things like that, buildings falling down. Maybe that's the intent. Or maybe this is what happens when weak men make hard times. Weak men refuse to adhere to some kind of structure. They give up authority and power because it's easier, thus ceding it to those who probably shouldn't wield it, and then they do, and then the system collapses. And I'm referring, of course, to things like, communist revolutions, where you get a group of people who say something like, hey, we should take the farmland from the farmers and then give it to the field hands because, they can do it. Then lo and behold, they can't farm, and then food runs out and everyone dies. This is what it feels like, in my view, when we're moving into a world of chaos. So here's the story from Insider, and let me read this for you, and we'll provide some critical commentary. First, it's important to understand that when he says his daughter, he's referring to a male child. You see, that's the issue of it making no sense. The average person can't make sense of this. And if you can't make sense of this, how do you structure a world and build cohesive systems? My wife is non-binary. How can she be both your wife, and non-binary? It makes no sense. They don't even know what they're talking about. He says, my 19-year-old daughter last month invited her mother to see the queer comedian Chris Fleming. My wife was thrilled. Our daughter still lives with us, but she often communicates in brief grunts as she scurries down to her basement lair, emerging only to let in friends and forage for chicken nuggets. She doesn't often include us in her social plans. And right there, I see it. Right there. My child doesn't interact with us, lives at home past the age of majority, grunts and takes our food. You ever watch Interview with a Vampire? When Brad Pitt, he's the vampire guy, and he's like, I was 24 on the master of my own plantation, but times were different. You were a man back then. I mean, dude, you're a man at 18. You're an adult at 18. You can do more. I lived in my own place. I moved out as soon as I could. I mean, before I even turned 18, I had forays into slowly moving out of my family's home. And my parents were split, but what I mean is, I wasn't even 18 when I'm 17 and I'm going to my friend's house and spending the night, or, crashing at a friend's apartment who was like 18 or 19, and we're hanging out and we're skating, slowly spending less time at the home and then venturing out and being an adult. And right here we can see this guy. I don't mean to single him out. I'm not trying to be a dick. He can live however he wants to live. But this is indicative of the influential individuals in our society and their views and how they treat their children. It's no surprise society is in the state that it's in. It's no surprise that he's saying, oh, my family's queer. Well, you gave them no structure. You understood nothing. You simply were a passive bystander as your child grew up. And instead of saying, here is the guidance I bestow unto you, you said, I don't know, go in the basement, eat chicken nuggets, and grunt. That sounds like bad parenting. You know what good parenting sounds like? A good parent tells their kid what to do. And that's reality. I've seen it from many of these hippie liberal parents. Well, let the children guide you. Let the children tell you what it wants to do. Kids don't know what they want to do. Take your kid, put him in front of a piano, get him piano lessons, and they say, but I don't like piano. Be like, yeah, well, too bad. This is what you're doing. And then when they're older and they're making, low to mid six figures in an orchestra or something, and they're loving playing piano and they're skilled, and everyone says, you're the greatest pianist I've ever heard. They can be like, thank you for guiding me, Father. Not everybody will fall in that direction. Mind you. You are hip and happening with the kids, I told my wife. She rolled her eyes. Her. This is what I'm saying when it makes no sense. How can your wife be non-binary, they, but then you literally say she and her over and over again? It's because this is weak men. I don't know if it's the endocrine disruptors, the plastics, whatever you want to call it. Grit strength has been on the decline. Men can no longer open the pickle jar. Now women have to use butter knives and bop it until the seal breaks and then they can pop the vacuum. Gone are the days when the big, strong man came in with forearms a glistening and grabbed that pickle jar and snap. More than just grip strength there, but you get the point. Male grip strength has been in decline, and that correlates with testosterone. This guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. I was not invited on this excursion because I wasn't a fan of Fleming. My wife has tried to explain his appeal. He's so funny. My wife and daughter's love for Fleming is rooted in another commonality. They're both queer. My daughter is transgender, meaning his biological male child, and my wife is bisexual and non-binary. As the boring cisgender straight guy in the family, you're not straight if your white is non-binary. This guy clearly has no idea what he's even talking about. But fine, I guess. He says, I just don't get some aspects of queer culture. I try to take an interest, but your demographic destiny sometimes rears up and says, pfft. But I'm grateful to be outnumbered in my family by the other demographics. When you share a family with queer people, your understanding of love becomes more expansive. And as your understanding of yourself. My wife is a resource for our daughter. Our daughter came out as bisexual in middle school. In high school, she reassessed and came out as trans and lesbian. Okay. Let's break this down. This man's biological male child came out and said that they were attracted to both males and females. Later came out and said, actually, no, they identify as female, but like females. There you go. Often when families, even supportive ones, discover their children are queer, they feel like it's a loss. There's a loss of the past because the child you thought you knew isn't who you think they were. And there's a loss of future because society is, in many ways, a homophobic garbage fire, and queer people face discrimination in many professions. My view is fairly libertarian. I don't care how you live your life, how you feel, what you want to do. Just some things should be kept private. Some things aren't for kids. But I'll tell you this. With a straight face and with compassion. You have failed your family and your child. That's what happened. Your child is confused and can't figure out if they are trans, lesbian, or bisexual, or whatever, because you were not a guiding force in the life of this person who needed someone to say, this is the world, this is who you are, this is how you fit in this place. From there, blossom and become all that you can be. Here's how I feel it should be. There's a reason why we have the age of minority and the age of majority. You are 18, now you're on your own. Not always and not completely, but as you get older, you start to branch out and explore and become who you are meant to be in the next decade or so, and then who you will most likely remain, though there are some changes that happen throughout your life. That is to say, when you're 16, you don't know what is going on, and you go to your parents, and your parents give you advice, and they guide you. But as you're becoming a teenager, and now you're driving, you are exploring further outside of your home into new areas and meeting new people and being influenced by new things, but you always come back to the root where your parents brought you. If you're a parent who doesn't do this for your child, they start confused, not knowing what is or could be, and they have no root, they have no structure, and so they're flipping around, bouncing around, and when they get older, guess what? It's no surprise, and I say this with compassion, that the suicide rates for individuals like this are so high. They have no root, nothing to turn to, nothing to go back to. You know, for me, when I get stressed out, there are things I do that I enjoy. I play music. I've played music since I was 7 years old. I play card games like Magic the Gathering. Started playing poker recently. Card games. I like the psychological. I like chess. And I can always go back to the roots of the things I enjoy and play video games. But what if you were given nothing? What if you grew up and told that you're the person, you can be free, and you have no root? You've never gripped anything. It's no surprise that professional athletes were high-level players, I should say, not professional, when they were young. It's no surprise the guy who's a pro baseball player, for the most part, probably played baseball when he was a little kid. It's no surprise that Tiger Woods has that famous video where he's a little kid golfing on TV, because you start there, and then you level up. Let's say, in your life, when you were little, your dad taught you how to box, and he kept bringing you to the gym. You're going to be ripped. You're going to be a pro. You're going to be a boxer. Now, some people could be naturals for some reason and have that deep within them, and they get in the game late, but for some reason had that natural talent, and they're like, wow. But what about people who had nothing? What about people whose fathers were lower middle class intellectuals who paid no attention to them, and their moms were wine moms who went drinking with the girls, and this person had no guidance at all? And they rode their bike around the neighborhood. They played random games with their friends. They never really learned to do anything. And when they got older, they started smoking pot. And now where are they? Desperately trying to fit in, but having nothing for which they can fit in. It's funny. The popular kids when I was growing up were good at sports. And so you would see them front and center. Everyone's cheering and clapping for them. And we knew being good at something and working hard got you recognition. But what about if you don't have a father who pays attention and guides you? How do you seek recognition now? Well, whatever the machine says. And the machine, of course, favors things like this, which leads to confusion, depression, and anxiety. People don't know what they need to feel accepted. There's a video, maybe I'll talk about it later, of a young trans man, I suppose, a trans boy, a female who wants to be called Mike, who's on the verge of tears because this individual's grandmother says, no, that's not your name. They're trying to fit in, and they think this is the only way to be accepted. Or how about the viral video of the trans man, a biological female who is discernibly, by any honest person, biologically female, working at a Starbucks, crying because they have to work 8 hours in one day, and because there's so many customers. This is a failure of the family. It is the family breaking apart. It is weak men making hard times. And this is exactly why people turn to the likes of Andrew Tate. Because Tate comes out, gives you the middle finger, is a world champion, kickboxer? He can beat you up. He says he doesn't take any flack from anybody. And so these young men who are desperate for a guiding force to say, this is how you succeed, turn to the likes of Jordan Peterson, who says, find the heaviest thing you can carry and carry it. And despite the fact that Jordan Peterson himself is an intellectual, he still has the balls to tell you to do hard work. Shut your mouth, don't talk back, clean your room, and you will be better off for it. Andrew Tate, not too dissimilar. I'm watching Yellowstone. And there's a scene early on where I'm on like season 3, halfway through. Scene early on where Jimmy's a criminal. They basically make him like, this is your second chance. You're going to be a cowboy. And he hates it. He's hurt. He's sore. And he's riding on a horse and he starts crying. And this older cowboy, Boyd, he says, something like it hurts, huh? The shame. It's not easy becoming a man. And that's an amazing message. I know people are complaining about Yellowstone for whatever reason right now. There's some woke stuff in it. But yeah, Andrew Tate had a message in a video that I saw that I think is important and powerful. I also want to point out, he's not been charged with any crime. So by all means, you can accuse him of things, but I want to see evidence. He's been arrested and detained without being charged for any crime. And witnesses who came out to defend him were told they were brainwashed. But I digress. He said, whether I wake up happy or sad doesn't matter. I have to do the same thing. He's completely right. You want to be a man? You want to be a hero? You want to change the world for the better? That means no matter what, you wake up and you do the same thing. You do the right thing. You do the hard work. You don't sit back and say, well, I guess I'm just the only cishet person in the family, so I offer no guidance to you. Now, I'm not saying dads should be smacking their kids or anything like that. Quite the contrary. Although I know many people who say they spank their kids. They should be a guiding force to prove to their child that they offer something of value, to offer their child a community and a path forward. He says, my daughter coming out as trans prompted my wife to think about her own gender. She's since come out as non-binary, though she's retained she, her pronouns. Well, that explains it, I guess, though, as I said, nonsensical. And then there's me, the only cishet. Cishet is intended to be a slur. It means cis heteronormative. Cis and trans, of course, are the math terms. And so they applied cis because someone was transgender, meaning they were transitioning or to transition or whatever it's meant to mean. Cis was the you align or whatever. Clever. But cishet is not used by individuals who align with their own gender. It is being pushed upon them to be called that. No, I don't know who decided that was the thing to call yourself, but that's what they're doing. I'm living out of the homophobic reactionary fever dream, he says. The conservatives warned me that the queer people were taking over, and now I'm outnumbered in my own home. Forced to hear secondhand Fleming jokes and listen to Grime and 100 Gex, the horror. I do feel slightly judged by my nearest and dearest for dressing badly and having some predictable gender presentation I've always had. But I like my wife and I like my daughter, and it's pleasing to know they have common ground. They can gather and share experiences, see comedians, and or mock me. I wish I had someone to connect with like that when I was younger. Yada, yada, yada. I'll tell you the point in all this. And, here's an interesting article. It's been 2 years since my spouse transitioned to genders. Our relationship is stronger than ever. It's really funny how this is the consistent narrative in the press, but I'll tell you where it goes. It leads to collapse and degradation. The family unit is the component of a nation. I'm a fairly liberal guy. I mean, women can work if they want to, find a solution for your kids, but where are we? Your kids are in institutionalized learning facilities that are meant to replicate factories from the industrial era. Your wife is working full time and not raising your kids. The school is raising your kids. And if you're lucky, you have someone come and clean your house and raise your kids for you. Probably you're having a hard time paying the bills. And so what happens then is the reaction is, instead of saying something like, you need to man up, and find a way to provide for your family. And that used to mean chopping down trees and hunting elk. It now means, the government should be providing, these things. It's amazing. And think about the men who built this nation. And the women, of course, they were there as well, creating the next generation, quite literally, and raising them. And the strong men who fought and died, and those who survived to make it all possible. And I think about the current thought leaders and those who get demonized. Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, because they are telling you to man up, to be a man, to embrace masculinity and learn what that means. Now, when there is a man who is ripped and arrogant and insulting people, you can call that toxic masculinity or whatever you want to call it. I call it being a dick. Because a real man and a real leader isn't a dick, but he can be stern. It reminds me of all those times. You hear someone say, girls like assholes or whatever. That's what you hear when you're growing up. Why is it that, The nice guy can't get the girl. Bro, you're not a nice guy. You're a weak guy. That's the thing. Women don't necessarily like assholes. Women like confident, strong men who know what they want and are willing to lead and take charge. And not all women. Perhaps some women like submissive, small-chinned men like Noah Burlesque. That was mean. I don't need to mock the man's chin. Which is my point. Some women probably like that. And that's fine. I got no issue with you liking what you want and being with who you want. I'm fairly libertarian. But I also recognize then it can go too far in one direction. And tolerance leads to acceptance, which leads to change. Now, for a lot of people, that's a good thing. And I can respect that, absolutely. Some things need to change. Like, for instance, ending racism. Extremely important in strengthening a nation. However, if you go too far in one direction, what ends up happening is we come from an era where there was Black Wall Street. And of course, racism led to its destruction. We ultimately decide, hey, these things are bad. We then say, okay, now you are free to work together and segregation is done and you can't discriminate. We'll set those standards. That is tolerance, acceptance, and change, and it's good. But then you get the bad. When the wokeness emerges in critical race theory and they seek to reinstate these policies, some suggest that it's pushing in the same direction of civil rights when in fact it's reversing them. In which case, a strong individual needs to say no and figure out when those changes should not happen. There needs to be some anchor, and there needs to be moral standards, and there needs to be strong men. So my advice to all of you, man up. I don't know, it's easy to say, I guess. I don't know. Maybe not. Start exercising. Stop making excuses. Start going for a walk. Stop eating garbage and be who you are meant to be. I don't know. That's all I can say, I suppose. Seeing this story and seeing the tweets around it. Renee Hoenderkamp, I got it. Why are we not discussing why our young men are so lost that they seek out Andrew Tate? They kill themselves. They think it would be better being a girl. We have made young men ashamed to be men, confused them over their role, told them they're toxic. This is why. Perhaps. McGill's, is it McGill's? 2023 is wild. If you're a dude who checks out a woman working out, you're a threat. But if you call yourself a woman and expose yourself to her in the locker room and she feels threatened, she's a bigot. And the reason for this? Weak men. Weak men. They sit in their offices. And they say, well, I worked really hard to get this position in government and the people are yelling in my ears. It's easier if we just don't fight. It's interesting. I watched this scene in Yellowstone. It's a great scene. So I don't know if you've seen Yellowstone, but I'm watching it and there's a crew and they're cowboys, right? They're cattle ranchers. And they notice that there's a bunch of dudes on their way to Sturgis, some bikers, and they're on the property. So they walk up and say, hey, you can't be here. Your private property, you got to leave. Fight breaks out. Then another one of the cowboys driving smashes their bikes. They fight. They beat the crap out of each other. One guy pulls a gun, and the character Rip walks right up, looking him in the eyes with a gun pointing his face, and then grabs it from him and says, get out. It's great. They then say these guys are going to come back, and they're going to destroy this field. And Rip is like, yup. So then the next scene, it's night, and the bikers are coming back. They jump out of their truck with gas cans and walk into the field, and lo and behold, there's John Dutton, the main guy, sitting there with a shovel. And he says, you came back to destroy my field. Why would you do that? And the guy says, we were just trying to have fun, and your guys came in. And he goes, this is my home. I live here. What would you do if I did this to your home? And the biker guy chuckles and says, me? I'd kill you. And then John goes, yup. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of the cowboys show up with the lights turn on, the strobing in their face with rifles pointed at them. And then all of a sudden, these bikers are terrified. That's a strong man. He then makes them dig their own graves as they beg and say, I have children. And then he says, these holes are going to stay here. I told you, or he says, he told you that if you didn't leave, you wouldn't leave. So he makes them dig the graves. Then he tells them to leave. And he says, if you come back, these holes are waiting for you. He didn't hurt him. He didn't fight him. He sent a message. That's a strong man. I like the show. And there's some wokeness stuff in it that people are complaining about. Maybe I haven't got to that part of the show yet. But that's what it means to be strong, to tell someone not to mess with your family and your home, to stand up for what you believe in. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the family in the show is like actually fairly evil, but it is what it is. Fairly, not completely. My point is just this. We are seeing what we're seeing because people are weak, because men are weak, and they expect other people to do the work for them. Remember what happened at the Wii Spa in, was it San Fran or whatever? You had a biological male expose himself to women, and a woman came out and complained. And the men working there said, no, it's a trans person. We can't intervene. Turned out it wasn't. Turned out it was a serial abuser exposing himself. And they arrested the person and said, yeah, this person actually does this all the time. It's not a trans person. But weak men would do nothing. Now, don't get me wrong. What we end up seeing in all of this is that it is much easier to target the innocent than it is to target the criminals. And this is due to weak men, terrified and pathetic cowards, namely many in the police. The example I'll give you is that a group of Black Lives Matter extremists can set fire to a home twice, nearly killing the occupants and destroying the property. They can then show up to another man's home. When that man threatens them, saying with a weapon, he didn't say it to their faces. He brandished a shotgun through his window as this same group protested in front of his home. The police came and arrested him. Why? Because it is easier to arrest the single guy, than it is to challenge a violent mob. And so long as that's the case, then the guilty will roam free, crime will run rampant, and no one will dare challenge the mob. Because if a group of people are willing to throw a Molotov cocktail at you, don't be surprised when no one comes to your defense, because they'll say, look, sorry, buddy, if I defend you, they'll throw it at me too. Best to loot the system and watch it burn to the ground than stand up for what you believe in. That's where we are. And that's why Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate are so popular. That's why so many people are willing to fight for them. Because I think so many people are just sick of being told that who they are on the inside is wrong. And I'm talking about men. And I'm also talking about women. The women who want to be mothers, who want to raise a family, but are also told it's wrong. I got another video as we get into all of this stuff. Chelsea Handler and her stupid Daily Show comedy where she says the life of a childless woman. And then she talks about cranking it off, drinking, building time machines, and other nonsense meant to just what? Encourage young girls to stay on hormonal pills to stop them from getting pregnant and to convince them that they'll actually be happier if they don't have a family? To the women who want to, who feel a desire, not all women do, I feel bad. And to the men who want to just chop wood and work in the yard and provide and can't, I feel bad. But there is one simple answer. You have to go do it. It's that simple. Stop being a whiny baby, I guess. And don't get me wrong, look, I complain for a living. So you can complain all day and night. But as you're complaining, stare into the eyes of the beast that threatens you. And whether you are happy or not, when you wake up, you must do the work. And man up. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. on this channel. I guess that's what we're doing right now because I decided I'm just going to do whatever I feel like doing. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you then.